Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder. This is your favorite program, Run Blog Run, and tonight we're featuring the British Olympic Trials Marathon champion and two-time British Olympian, Chris Thompson. Great to see you, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And congratulations on several things. First of all, the Monday before the win at the trials, you and your lovely wife now have a son, Theo.
Yeah.
And so congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
And then congratulations for catching the hearts and minds of a lot of runners around the world with your amazing win in lovely Kew Gardens. And the smile on your face, man, was so honest and stuff. It was just really, really cool. I want you to take us kind of through the race, and I'll have a few questions for you and stuff like that. In most of the stories on you, it said you were at about the 10K when I think you guys are like 30:51. You kind of reassessed and said going on a little too quick. So take us through that process and how you were feeling and where you thought you were going to finish that day.
Yeah, I think it's reliving that moment. There was a few things going on even before the race had started. I was a bit nervous about how I was going to feel after the week I'd had. Obviously, you mentioned Theo.
Yeah,
and it was a mad week and a real adrenaline rush of a week, as you can imagine. So I was a bit unsure, but also I hadn't run that course before. I didn't know what to expect from the way we were running. We ran one small lap and 12 bigger laps, and so for a marathon that's quite unique. So I wasn't 100% certain how that would feel. The weather actually turned on us. We had brilliant 10 days, and then that day it was just a really blustery on the twisty section up. So there's a lot of things that I had to use my experience a lot in the past. I thought, right, let's just see how it plays out. And after we were set to do 65 minutes for halfway, and I think we were bang on that. I think you said the split. I think it was about right at 30 minutes. And I was just not quite feeling it. I was feeling a bit like, I'm having to be a little bit too itchy just to keep on this. And I felt a little bit like I'm running to their beat, not my beat. And so I felt like, right, I need to kind of check back, go into my own little rhythm and run the corners and the bends and run the course that suits me. Because the cliche, it's a marathon, not a sprint, is massive. I knew I've run enough marathons to know an hour and a half, if you've overdone it, there's no coming back from it. I needed to give myself a chance. So I took a step back and I didn't allow the gap to increase. I just didn't stop it. It was, we talk about a piece of string of a group. And I think if it was a shorter race, you're fighting to keep that elastic band from snapping. But it slowly kind of dripped open. And I have to say it was gradual at first. I think it got to about 15 seconds at halfway. So over the first 30. And at that point I thought, okay, that's fine. I'm okay. Just, there's a lot of negative energy coming at me here. I'm still kind of I don't feel like I could close this gap. I feel like, and they're not looking like they're slowing down, and it kept growing. And it got to about 35 seconds, I think, the gap, someone shouted to me.
Yeah.
And the only thing that made me feel better was that I knew I was still within the qualifying time of 2:11:30. But I was starting to feel like, hang on, I still wasn't making a move in myself at this point. I was still running my own race at this point because I felt like, with another 45 minutes of the left of the race, that's a lot of running to start kind of turning the screw to try and close that gap. And then it was, as I say, I was trying not to ignore a lot of the negative thoughts and just think, right, there's 3 lads ahead of me. If I run the time, and then we'll see, try and run the time. That's all you need to focus on. Just ignore everything else. And I noticed as I turned one of the corners that, because Callum Hawkins was still pacing at this point. I think Gavin had dropped out. And I just noticed a gap from the pacemaker to the group. And I thought, that's strange. That you wouldn't do that if you're still feeling it and you're feeling good. And I just felt this surge of, hang on, it was the first glimmer. Even though I couldn't see them, I couldn't hear them, my usual sort of things that give me the feedback. I thought, hang on, there's something there that they're flinching. And I've just put my head down, turned a couple of corners, and I looked up and went, hang on, this gap's closed. And even though it was still significant, I mean, 20, 25 seconds is significant in a marathon.
Yeah.
Anyone that's run a marathon that knows that can flip quickly, especially in the last quarter of a race, and you get on the front foot and they're on the back foot. And I think I closed that gap, that 30, 35-second gap in the space of a mile and a half. I think it happened very quick. I think the cameras even missed it.
Yeah.
And I got to about a few meters behind them, and I thought, right. I suddenly went into race mode again. I went, hang on, this is possible again. Hang on, all right, take a breath. I gave myself a minute, calmed myself down, and I thought, right, what's the best thing to do here? And this is, I mean, as you know, all these thoughts, they sound nice when I'm saying them, but they're happening like this. They're happening really quick, snapping through your head. Take a minute, right, what do I do next? And I thought, right, test them, see where you're at. And I went, and the camera didn't see it, but I did a surge, and I knew I was only going to do it for 30, 40 seconds. I just wanted to see who would go with me. And I went, put my head down, and then eased off. And I looked behind me, and Dowie had gone, and just Ben and Mo had gone with me. And I thought, fine, we've still got 5 miles, chill. This, we're still within the time, and there's still 2 other runners with you here. And they're both good runners, and Dowie's are good. They're all really, really classy runners. At that point, I just went back into a rhythm, calmed myself down again. And that's when I started flipping to listening to them, monitoring them, how they're moving, just assessing, trying to read how they feeling. I'm on the front foot. Are they enjoying what's going on? And then as we were going back through the wind, so we were coming up to 2 laps to go. So that was about 4 miles left. I could tell again the movement of them. I was moving, trying to pick a line, but they didn't seem very in control of their movements. They seemed to just be pushed around by the wind, or they weren't thinking too much. And I thought, okay, I'm going to just go back into my rhythm again here and just see what happens. And I got to the course was tough out with the wind, twisty, and then it was kind of a long, nice straight back, and so you could kind of get into a nice rhythm on the way back to the finish the lap. And it was when I turned that corner again, I just let my legs go. It was like I just took a rubber band off my legs and just let them run. I didn't force it, and it wasn't until I watched back on the camera. In my head at the time, I had a 100-meter lead, and it wasn't. It was about 10, 15. But I felt so happy in myself and so comfortable with what I was doing. Someone could have told me that they're on you, Chris, and they feel great, and I'd gone, no, they're not. Like, I felt that much on the front foot. I'd felt like I'd paced myself that well. And at that point, there was just positive energy was coming at me from all kinds of directions. The small number of spectators that were there, or my Mike Skinner, who works for Pace, he was my +1, giving me bottles, giving me incredible feedback. And at that point, I then turned a corner with about 1.5 miles to go, and I went to just look. I got a little bit of cramp in my hamstring, and suddenly I just went, whoa, Chris, calm down. Like, this is a marathon, remember, and you have to run the full 26.2 miles. Yeah. And I then I went back into a much more of I wanted to keep the pace, but I took the foot off the gas a little bit just to nurture myself to the finish, because I knew I had plenty of time in the bag. I knew I was away, and I couldn't help but be smiling inside, feeling like this is really happening. I couldn't believe it. And I held it. And then I just, with about 20, 30 meters, just let loose. I just couldn't control myself anymore. I was so happy. I've never dreamt of having a moment like that. And it wasn't just the race, it was Theo, it was all the years that I've kept trying and kept fighting. You know, the amount of people that I've had to rely on to keep supporting me, despite the fact that it would, to most people, it seemed like a lost cause, and I couldn't have done it without their support. And it just meant everything to me to be able to kind of feel like I'd paid them back, I'd paid my wife back, I'd paid everyone back, and I'd also done it myself. I proved to myself that it was worth sticking at it. It was worth fighting. It was, you do have that inner talent. And despite being 39, and I'm 40 in a couple of weeks.
Congratulations, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and I may not be as fast as I was 9-10 years ago. That's fine, but that doesn't take away from the fact I can still perform like that, and I can still run well enough to make teams, and I can still run enough to make to have moments like that. And that was why it meant so much, because it's not necessarily my greatest physical performance, but it was the greatest moment of everything that it represented over my whole career in so many ways.
What did your coach Alan Story say to you the last time you guys chatted about the race beforehand?
Right. Well, he's a man of few words. The closer he gets to the race, the less he says.
Okay.
Which is he's very good like that. I say good because an athlete just wants a coach just to blurt a loader out, give you as much ammunition mentally as you can going in. But let me see. So what did we talk about? Because it's funny because of the birth of Theo, we'd done a lot of our conversations the week before. So when it came to the week, it was he just waited for me to ring, and he pretty much just listened to me. Okay. He didn't say anything that was other than, look, you're in good physical condition. I know, and just re-emphasize, I know you know how to manage yourself. He says to me a lot about, he calls it my Krypton tuner that is never off. And what he means by that is I'm always very aware of my body and what state it's in. So, I will, there's 24 hours in a day, and you usually train for 1 or 2 hours of that day, maybe a couple of times, but it's the hours between that. And if I'm traveling or anything, I'm always very aware of, this is tight, or I need to eat here, and he says I'm constant. And he said, all he did was reaffirm he believed that he knew I knew how to manage myself through that week. And it was just a reaffirmation. And then again, before the race, he reaffirmed, I know you know how to race manage. And that is something that he does. And when I think about it, I know it, in the heat of the battle, I know it gives me the confidence to know I'm making the right decision. So when I'm 30 minutes in and I'm saying to myself, I probably need to run in my own race, I haven't got someone thinking, well, no, that's not the right thing because we've had a different conversation. He's very good at empowering me to trust in my own decision-making in those moments and reaffirm trust in your decision-making at that moment. And we'd spoken as well, but not directly before, but the week before, about the other runners and how they run and what to expect out of them. And without, talking too much, stereotyping the other runners into how I may view them, because they probably view themselves in other ways, but there are certain characteristics of how other athletes race, and knowing what that might look like in the second half of a marathon. And that's something that enables me to make decisions on the day about knowing who I'm up against and how they run. And it sounds like that's a lot of thinking, and that's a lot, but that's how I have to be, because I was talking to someone about how my first half of my career, I judged myself on how hard I pushed myself. And it was just, there was never an off switch. It was push, push, push. The harder I pushed, the more I felt affirmation that I'd done well.
Mm-hmm.
The second half of my career, I've realized that doesn't get me a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
And I've had to really, and especially the fact I can't cope. I can't physically go out the door and push myself 3 times a week all out and expect myself to recover. I can't do it. I can't go to the well as often as I would like. I know how to hurt myself, but I have to be smart about how I do it. And so I do think about what I'm doing a heck of a lot more. I do analyze myself and my surroundings. And I would say there's not many races in the last 4 or 5 years that I haven't either won or finished highly because I've thought about it more than I used to.
Was there a workout that you did in the last 3 or 4 weeks that told you that you were right there?
Yeah, there was. So I did. I'd have to look at the exact dates, but like you say, it was somewhere in around 3 weeks out. I did a session, and Scott overall was with me. So he did the first part on the running with me, and let me remember this. I did something like I can't exactly remember the breakdown, but I ran something like 30 minutes at about, I want to say 5:45 pace, and then I ran something like 45 minutes, I think, at 5:30. But again, that was what set pace is. But I actually ran slightly quicker for that, and then the last hour was just run hard. And Scott did the first part steady, and then he jumped on the bike, and I ended up running the last hour. I think I averaged like 5:02 miling, which isn't setting the world alight, but anyone that's run around Bushy Park knows it's not easy around there in terms of I'm going through gates, I'm running around people, and so you kind of run that knowing, well, if I had a straight road with nothing, it's worth a few seconds. And so I did that. So I ran 25 miles, and I think I averaged 5:15, but what I did then was I did that. I had a couple of runs the next day, and then on the Tuesday, I think it was, or 2 or 3 days later, I went back and I ran 75 minutes or 80 minutes roughly, and I averaged 4:56.
Wow.
And I was floating, and I rang Alan and I went, "Oh, I tell you what." I said, and the thing about it wasn't so much the initial session, because on the initial, when you look at that initial session I described, that the reason that was good was because of what I could back it up with a couple of days later. And even that session, I was tired, and it was like that. I had a block of 10 days. I've never had a block of 10. That 2 weeks out block of 10, and those were the 3 days where I just was like, well, I've not done stuff like this before. And I said to Alan, after a mile of that second session, my first mile was 4:48, and I couldn't slow myself down. And I said, Alan, I knew after a mile I was going to have a ridiculous session. And he said to me, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And he said, keep that under your hat. And it was, and I didn't stop there. I did do a couple of other sessions which were reasonable, but I was tired. I was starting to get tired, and it was almost like, right, that was your kind of peak. I'd had a really good 25-mile run, and then a really high-end 15 and a half mile run. And it was like, well, the two extremes are matching up here. And then it was a case of, then I did a couple more workouts, which actually were, even after that, better than I've done previously, but they paled in significance to what I'd done. So I was doing stuff I'd not done before. And that gave me the confidence to know, even though I was about to have the most hectic week of my life, if I just could find a way to look after myself. I mean, I described it to someone like I'd built a really strong ship, but there was water coming in, and it was slowly filling as more things were happening. And I had to keep the boat afloat, and I had to keep chucking out that water, so stress that was happening. And I rode I honestly think I couldn't have rowed a finer line and that boat would have sunk. And it wouldn't have been because my fitness wasn't there, but it'd have been another factor. But that's, again, that's racing. How many people can say they went to a major championships, had a stinker, and then a week later go and run a massive PB because the shape's there. But in the heat of that moment, there's so many other things going on that you can't quite bring it out. And that's what I was having, this really intense week, really intense feelings, knowing that I was 39. This was probably going to be my last chance. There was so much stuff going on. I haven't talked about it much. I broke my hand 9 weeks before the race as well.
Oh my God.
So there was a heck of a lot happening. So, and again, but these are things that when you're an athlete, you're just trying to find a way, you know, because no one, if I hadn't have made that team, then, you know, I wouldn't be talking to you or anyone about the journey I had to make it happen. It becomes relevant when you find a way, doesn't it? And I think that's the thing about it is in that moment, I was just trying to find a way, and I was so proud of myself to find a way, because I know that how much affirmation or relevance that has become for me, and the journey I've had to be able to overcome these things. I mean, becoming a dad was very overwhelming. Some people maybe not so, and that's not judging anyone at all. It's just for me, it was it was really, really overwhelming to have that happen in a really nice way.
Yeah. You competed for the UK since 1998 when you competed in the European Junior under 20? Was it the steeple?
So that was the World Championships in Annecy in 98, and steeplechase. And actually, you may remember the guy that did the double that year in the sprints, 100 and 200. It was Christian Malcolm, who is
cool. Yeah.
Now he's our head coach of UK Athletics, and I said to him, he was my first athletic crush, because he was just amazing. This guy was winning in incredible fashion, and he must get annoyed I say this to him all the time, but every time I see him, I say, one of the things that really made it for me was I was just a young kid. I was 16 in this championship. It was all overwhelming. You see Christian win the 100 and 200. I'm on the bus and I'm stood next to him, and I'm so intimidated. I'm going, that's Christian Malcolm. He turns to me and he says, how are you doing? How'd you get on? I was like, it was just such a nice chap, and it meant everything. And I still remember it today because it meant so much that someone who was achieving that still took the time to say, hey, to me. And I was just a little kid just trying to find my way, just completely out of my depth, trying to do an event I'd only run a couple of times in my life.
Wow.
And it was amazing. But yeah, he's now our head coach. And there's a few athletes I could name. There was Goldie Sayers was there.
Sure.
Javelin Olympic medalist. So many very, very good athletes came from that event, including me.
In 2003, you won the European Under 23 5000.
Was it 2003? You're probably right. I can't remember. Yeah, it must have been that year. Yeah, and I beat Mo.
What did you remember about that race?
I remember being favourite. I remember thinking that there was a lot of. It felt more pressure than enjoyable, because again, I've always enjoyed being an underdog, like trying to achieve things that are not necessarily expected. I find things that are more expected a bit more like baggage, actually. But I remember it was myself and Mo Farah, who obviously everyone knows and has gone on to achieve what he has achieved, and he actually dropped me with 800 to go. He had this thing about him where he wasn't. I always said when he was younger, when he realizes how good he is, he's going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And he had this knack of panicking. about a K 800 out. And Alan Story was coaching him. And there was a couple of times, and this race was no different, where he would go early because he was desperate to drop whoever he was with to try and win the race. And he took off and he got a good 30, 40 meters on me. Maybe 40 is an exaggeration, but it was a good 20, 30 at least. And I got to, I think it was about 500 to go. He'd stopped growing the gap, and then I just slowly reeled him in, and I caught him with about 10 meters from the line, and he collapsed.
Wow.
And I felt bad, but it was a real special moment because we're both really good friends. And he could, I was trying to drag him around a lap of honor, but he couldn't get up.
Wow.
But it was, and there was an Irish lad who was third, but that was one of the last times, I think, possibly is the last time I beat him actually. But it's certainly that quirky kind of thing he used to do. He kept doing for a good 3 or 4 years actually, until he sort of grew into he became a bit more, because if you remember, he did it in 2011 World Championships in the 10,000.
He panicked in the 10,000. Yeah. I mean, I remember sitting there watching it. I'm just going, okay. He can get this guy, but he made that. I think he moved with 1,000 instead of waiting till about 600. And the Ethiopian, Ibrahim
Jalen,
Jalen, he just got pumped up and in front of the crowd. But 2010 European Championships, you guys went 1-2 in that 10,000. That looked to me, because I've watched it now on YouTube several times, and I was supposed to be there, but I wasn't able to get over. That was an incredibly tactical race. What do you recall of that one?
Yeah, it was, and my memory of that was, so Mo and I were both in Font-Romeu in the build up to that, and we'd actually done a couple of sessions together. So I was coached by Mark Rowland at the time, and Mo was coached by Alan, who's now my coach.
Yeah.
And Mark and Alan are good friends. And so we actually were in Font-Romeu together, and we did a session. Let me remember it. It was, and this was about 3 or 4 weeks before the championships, and we ran a mile, 2 800s, 4 400s, and then I ran 8 200s and he ran 4 400s again. But the mile we ran, and bearing in mind we were at Font-Romeu's around 6,000, 6,500 feet.
Yeah.
And the idea of the session was Ben Bruce, who was my partner, training partner at the time, he was going to pace us through 208 through the 800, and then me and Mo would take over 64s. And and Ben always jokes, he was coming up to 800 and on pace, and then Mo just went, and I followed him. And we went through him at 206, and then Mo threw in I think it was a 60-second lap. And then I threw down another one, and we ran 406, 405 mile. And,
wow.
And it was something like that. And I dropped him. I dropped him on the last lap, and I waited for him in the reps. Wow. No, this is a session. Don't get silly. So I waited for him, and then we did a couple of 800s, and they were 202, I think it was 201, and then we did some 456, and then literally we got separated. They were like, "Whoa, we need to separate these guys because they're on one today." And the next weekend, I ran 13:11, and Mo ran 13:07 at Gateshead.
Yeah.
So if you remember, that next weekend, so we were both in good shape. And then after that point, Mark and I assume chatted. We weren't allowed to train together because it was almost like we'd have knocked each other out to the championship.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So we both went in good nick, and I knew I'd had a little bit of an edge on him in a session, and I thought, I wonder here. And then we got to a mile to go in the 10K, fast forward all the way to that point. Not much had happened, so about a mile. And then Mo just put a little bit of a surge in, and he did it right at the moment where I wasn't feeling great.
Yeah.
And he got a bit of a gap, and he took Landesam, the Spanish athlete, with him. And and they opened a gap, and then I was stuck a bit in no man's land with Daniel Mucci and a couple of other athletes, and they had a good 50-meter lead with about 1,200 to go, and it opened pretty quick. And then Mo actually, there's a video, he beckons me in a kind of a, because we joked about we'd been first and second before, to be first and second again. And he kind of was like looking back, because he obviously was feeling really, really good. And I just thought, I think the heat and everything, I hit a bit of a funk.
Yeah.
And then with about, I think it was 800 to go, I again went, as you do, I went into my own little bubble of, right, I have not come all this way, done all this and get into the shape not to medal. And at that point, I thought I was lying in third, and I thought I had the whole field on my shoulder. I just didn't want to look.
Yeah.
And I then just got my head down and just thought, right, 800s, just start every 200, pick it up. Every 100, just keep picking up. Do not let anyone past you. And I got to about 300, and I could still hear Daniel on my shoulder, well, someone on my shoulder. I looked up and I saw Mo had gone, and Landesam was coming back to me. And I went, right, stop looking behind you. You're catching him. And I just put my head down, and I'm going there now in my mind. I remember turning the bend with 100 to go, seeing Landesam, knowing there's athletes behind me, going, I'm here. This is the moment now. This is everything. And I was pumping every bit of my body that I had. I was like, because Mo was gone, that had gone, but I was like, I literally had everything pumping. I was going hit, toe to shin, heel to bum, all those things that I was just pumping for my life. I went past Landesam, and I could feel someone coming up on my shoulder, and I was just screaming for that line to come to me. And once I'd got over it, it was another one of those kind of, it almost felt like I'd made a meal of it, but it was a medal that I felt physically I should be getting, but I'd made a meal of it, and there was an element of relief but at the same time, it was like, once it calmed down, I was like, wow, we're first and second, what a moment. And me and Mo were able to celebrate it. And he obviously went on to do the double. He won the 5,000 and the 10. And I was just, again, maybe I get too emotional, but I was too emotionally drained for the 5K. I was just like, it just took everything out of me emotionally after that.
So you had 3 coaches. Let's see. You had 4. Mick,
yes,
John Nuttall, then Mark Rowland, and then Alan. Yes. What was the biggest thing you learned from Mick?
Biggest thing I learned, I think, and this, for people that know Mick, they might laugh, but I really found my love for the sport with Mick because of I had a really good network of friends, and I was obviously at that age, I'm learning to train. So I'm learning to train while having fun at the same time. And we had a really good setup at Aldershot for that to happen. And Mick did have a big belief that I could be an Olympian one day, but I never thought about it. That was for him to kind of nurture for me. And so I really learned to enjoy it, but also I really learned how to push my body. But again, that was something in my latter years I had to work out. Once I'd learned that power, I then had to use it wisely. So I definitely learned a love and enjoyment. And obviously you got to learn how, if you've never run before, what's a session? How does a session work? What does recovery mean? All those things I was learning to train under him. So I learned that, and I learned toughness, and I learned, my love. I say learned, but I found my love for the sport through him, definitely.
John Nuttall was your second coach, and John was a fine runner in his own right. I spent some time with him in Doha a bit, and was always enjoyed his sense of humor. Had a couple 8 evenings with him and Mr. Stewart. But what was he like as a coach? What did you learn from John?
John was John was a good friend as well. I always felt sorry for John insofar as he picked me up when I was we started working together when I was I'd come off the back of a very long-term injury. I had a shin injury that put me out for a year, and I said this to someone else. I didn't grow up very quickly, should we say, in a nice way. I was a bit of a Peter Pan. I still probably am a little bit. And he did spend a lot of time kind of trying to help me grow up and understand that running is not just run hard, go home. It's a lot more complex than that. And I'd say he had the toughest years with me, not just because I had a lot of stuff I had to iron out with injuries and stuff, but also me as a person, as an athlete. If I was going to become a good athlete, I had to grow more into understand. And I remember he was trying to teach me what tempo running was and the subtleties of running in different zones. And I went through a phase there where I was almost, I say experimented, but I did have a couple of moments where I was a little bit unhealthy with food and stuff like that, because I was just I was starting to think a bit more about what I was doing. And he had a real tough period with me because of what I was like. And he really helped kind of kickstart the fact that I remember him ringing me after London Olympics was announced, and was it 2006 or 7? And he said, he just rang me and said, like, that's got to be a huge motivation for you. Come on. But I needed that call, because I didn't look at it and go, oh, wow, I want to be Olympian in 5 years in London. Yeah. I just sat there and went, oh, we've got London Olympics. But he was the one going, come on, Chris, like, think about it. Think about how you're training. Like, and he had to, he almost was like my athletic parent, if that makes sense. And
no, it does. It does. Coaches have a lot of those roles. I mean, they're advisor, confessor, cheerleader, coach. Mark Rowland, and I've got to say I have a lot of affection for Mark. I learned to respect him as an athlete, and when I heard about the lengths he went to learn how to hurdle, I was totally impressed. What was he like for you as a coach, and what did you learn from him?
Wow. I mean, Mark is one heck of a human being. I mean, what did I learn from him? I mean, the list is endless, but I think the thing that will always stand out for me was he really, because obviously part of the reason that relationship started was because he coached at the time my now wife Gemma Simpson, and Mark, his last Olympics UK based was 2008 in Beijing, and it was after that Olympics he moved to America, and now he's the head coach of Oregon Track Club, and it has been since then. And most of his athletes that year were retiring or moving on. Gemma was the only one that wasn't. And so he offered Gemma the chance to come out. And I had just not long got together with Gemma, and Gemma wanted me to come with her and asked Mark if he didn't mind. And he was a bit reserved. He was a bit unsure of it because he knew what my reputation was like. And he didn't necessarily want that kind of attitude in his group. You don't want like someone messing up with the dynamics of an athletic group. You want discipline and all this kind of stuff. And when I got out there, he took me on. He knew I had talent, but he sat me down a couple of times, and it was like, right, I'm not messing around here. I'm here to take this seriously. You damn well should be as well. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of moments where I was late for training by 5 minutes, and it was like the world had collapsed. He just really went to town on me, and it was good. It's what I needed. And he says, match the effort the athlete puts in. And he really set an example. He has zero tolerance on himself when it comes to how much detail and effort he puts into his coaching, and he expects that from his athletes because he puts in 110%. I've not seen someone plan, think. He is insatiable with what he does, and he really gets it in a way that I've never seen it. Especially, I mean, he says his favorite event to coach is the mile, and you think. He takes it to the detail he takes it to is incredible. And I didn't want to mess it up for Gemma. I just did not. I just would have felt terrible if I'd have gone there and created issues for Gemma in that relationship. And so that's when I really grew up, and I became this obsessive athlete, almost too much. Unfortunately, I went the other way of being like every session was big, and I really got my head down. And Mark was he was the tonic I needed to just kind of, and he it was the first time I'd really been able to get stuck into the real complexities of trading zones, and he really knew how to flavor things, and my body just thrived immediately off what he was giving me. And under him, it was the first time I'd run for a year without any injuries.
Wow.
Since 2005. And he always prided himself on athletes, and everyone will have different experiences,
Sure.
But he was very much like, I want to put you in a physical condition that makes you very difficult to break down, because I'm going to throw the kitchen sink on at you, but I'm going to make you robust enough to handle it. And I managed a year uninjured for the first year. And that's when 2010 happened. It just blew up for me, because I was just conditioned. I was ready to absorb. I was ready to accept it. And it just was like a real match. And I thought it's a shame, because it was, we had so much success and so much good things. I just didn't quite have an off switch in myself.
Yeah.
I just was almost, it's that, how many people look back and go, I just wish I'd kept doing the same thing, but I kept trying to come back and do more. In myself, I just kept trying to better myself. And, he created one hell of a platform to me. I mean, I'm so grateful for the fact that he put a platform together for me to get myself to as close to my absolute best as possible. And he put a team together, and I'm forever grateful for it. And 2012 will always be one of those, when I did get injured, we were both just so miserable we were so close to that kind of doing everything almost perfect. And it was my own fault for just being that little bit too much. But yeah, phenomenal man. Like, I got so much admiration for him. I can't even, words can't, so much admiration for the guy.
And now you're with Alan Story. And Alan is one of those, again, like Mark, one of those iconic coaches. Virtually everybody in British distance running has an Alan Story.
Yeah.
You made you had a huge presence of mind after your race. I was totally impressed with it, because you talked about a little earlier that you were trying to thank people and all that kind of stuff, and there's all these things going through your mind in what is like the culmination for you of a incredible career, from starting with the steeple, 5,000, 10,000. I've watched you run on the roads. I was there when you ran your 61 minutes. And I got to tell you, man, after that race, you were really happy, but you also, this is what I watch for, coming from the coach background and stuff. You were covered like that, man. You were just so happy. And it was the conditions. It's a fast courses at the, but there was wind. You worked for that, and but you were pleased, and you had some good marathons in the years. Then you had some tough stuff. I unfortunately a lot of years to be there when you had the tough ones too.
Yeah.
But you thanked Alan, and I wanted to ask you again. You've had 4 amazing coaches in your life. What did you learn from Alan? What has that relationship been like?
Alan is, anyone who's been blessed enough to meet that guy is, or have dealings with him, is a phenomenal human being. And I quite often, and again with Mark and Alan they have this unique thing that they're quite outwardly, they have this hard exterior to try and because they want to do the best they can. But I've always said, anyone who's coached by either of them, I've always said, there'll be a moment you have when you realize how much they care about you. And Alan and Mark, I had that with Mark, and because he is a strong, London lad. And Alan's no different. He has this hard exterior, but he's such a soft, gooey middle. And he has not just been a coach. He's been a mentor. He's been a life coach in general. We talk. Ironically, after things like this, it's difficult because so much is going on, but it's very rare that we don't talk every day for 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not about running. It's just anything. We're just talking about anything and everything. And we're interested in each other's lives. We have a very deep friendship that's born through actually a history of the sport, because he's been there since I was a kid. He was a head coach with UK Athletics when I was starting out. So I've always known him. So he's always been there in the background, even though he wasn't directly my coach. Obviously, the relationship he had working with Mo when I was competing with him. So he's always been there, and he's got a wealth of knowledge. We help each other out in different ways for different things again. And his knowledge and the level of detail he takes things to. And this is the most incredible thing about working with Alan. And a lot of people probably will think how, but I think this is a reflection of him and me, and why it's the latter of my career. Since 2014, I can count on one hand how many sessions he's watched.
Wow.
And that is because he can't. He's a long way away. I do things, I report back to him, and we talk it through. But it's a and he coaches a lot of athletes like that at the moment, because he can't. They're all dotted around, and he's helping them to the best of it. And he said to me, how many times he said, if you care about the athlete, you're already nearly there to being a great coach. And he gives little things like that. He really does care. And he also, what's funny with him, with how we discuss sessions, is at the beginning we used, I would record my sessions online so he could look and almost mark my homework of description, just to check how, when I say and what he can see. And as that time went on, he didn't need to do that as much. So in my first marathon build-up in 2014, it was very much look online and that, and I feedback. But as the time's gone on now, and this is what I say to people, and it sounds weird, but even in this marathon build-up, when I talk to him, the first 5 minutes is, right, how many days do you need to recover? It's not what times you ran. It takes me a while before I even get to that point. I almost flippantly at the end go, by the way, this is what I average for 15 miles. Or it's very much, how long do you need to recover? Were you on top of it? It's the things that are have become more relevant are less the times. It's more what's going to keep us consistent. And I know when he gives me a session, I know what he wants from it. And I know I can literally just give him a thumbs up on the phone and we're on it. And we're almost second guessing each other. This is how weird we became. We had, me and Gemma, it doesn't matter the backstory necessarily, but someone asked Alan, how long on average do you spend talking to Chris on the phone? And he gave an answer, and they came over to me and they asked me the same question separately. So we didn't know each other answers. Yeah. We gave the same number. And that sounds weird, but because the way we can kind of read each other. And so, he's a great man. And like I say, I think part of the reason it's worked is because of the history of coaches and the history of everything to get me to the point to understand what I'm doing. And also the massive connection that Alan and Mark have. And so I can understand, that transition was so easy because they're so alike in so many ways. So I've been so lucky to have worked with 4 great people and 4 great coaches, and a career that's gone on for 26 years. It's a long time. It's a quarter of a decade.
We're down to the last 5 minutes. You've actually set a record now. I think we're over. I've sent 2 notes to Mike to extend it because I wanted to learn more. So here's the probably the final question, and I wanted to see what you think. In the 1970s, I was influenced by a New Zealand marathoner, Jack Foster. Jack Foster didn't start running until he was about 33. He had been a rugby player before, and he made Olympic teams at 36. He took the silver in the Commonwealth Games when he was 37, and he was still competing. I mean, he ran a 2:22 marathon when he was 50. You're 39 now, and you seem to be racing. Your theme is, you've got all the speed background, and when you need to call that neuromuscular loop for the last 300 meters, I'm pretty confident that you could do it. How long are we going to see you racing? How much longer is this career going? Are you going to be looking at coaching? Are you just going to kind of let it go and kind of to let it take you where it takes you? And if that's too personal right now, I get that too.
No, not at all. I think it's difficult because especially with the pandemic, I've had a lot of conversations with myself. I think a lot of people probably have had time to reflect and think a lot more, and I'm no different. I mean, I saw this year as a bit of a winding down year, and thinking about like obviously we've now started a family, so there was what am I going to do next? And I do coach a bit. I have a lad running tomorrow in a 5K, and he's hopefully in pretty good nick. I spoke to him just before I spoke to you, actually, just to give him his last bit of advice. But so I have been doing bits of coaching. I want to get more qualified. Obviously I work with On Running, and again with On Running, it's been great because I'm not just an athlete. I do stuff with them and discuss things, and I've been just chatting to them how might the future look. And it's funny, this result has kind of thrown things a little bit up in the air again of like, I'm going to retire at some point from running. I have to, because I can't do it forever. But I think I have learned that you never know what's around the corner. And I think the only way I can describe it is I want to keep adding skills to my bow, i.e. I want to get better at things like potentially that might involve commentary, or I want to get better at coaching. I want to get better at all these, personal skills that hopefully will enable me to do lots of things. But the one thing I do know is that I really love the athletic community. I really think it's a special group of people, and the response I've had has been so humbling that why would I want to not be involved in some way? And I really hope that I can do something that still keeps me enabling to be around the relationships that there are, because I think that athletes that I know we're very insular people and probably very in some way selfish, but in a good way. We are also very giving and very a lovely group of people, and I hope I stay involved. And it's not a personal question, it's just a very kind of open-ended future for me, I guess. And I've already thought, like, would this result qualify for me for the Commonwealth Games next year? Would I turn that down? I mean, sure, I'd probably be silly to do that, but I never considered that in January. I wasn't thinking about that, but now I'm going, hang on, that then there's also the Eugene World Champs. I mean, crikey, I mean, it's ages, to me, ages is very situational. If I can create an environment that allows me to keep myself healthy and in one piece, then physically I don't, Alan will always say that your body will give you more than you think you can when you get older. It's just sometimes life gets in the way, and that's not a bad thing, but it does. And so I've been very good at keeping my life quite boring, I suppose, is a better way to allow me to do this. but at some point life will catch up, and I will obviously having a child, that things are going to change, and that might, and that age might not be the restricting factor. It might just be life becomes very different in a great, lovely way. But I think the fact that I've had probably, I think I worked out, I've had 2 full summer intense track seasons since 2004, just 2.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And that, I think, makes a big difference for longevity. Because if I'd have had 3-4 months of intense summers for 10 years on the bounce, I think I would be in a very different place right now, because that's intense. But I've only had a couple. And I think that, I've done the winter work, but winter's not the same as going from intense race to just crushing yourself in 5 and 10Ks just week after week. It's not the same thing. So I think that helps. But while if I can keep myself young at mind and young at heart, then I've learned the nice way that anything's possible. So
I also think you have a future career in comedy. I gotta say that I recall, I think it was 2016 or 17 perhaps. I shared a taxi with you over to the London Marathon Expo, and I thought I needed oxygen afterwards, because it was just one joke after. And I'm trying to remember who was with us. I think it was, I think your wife may have been there, and then there was a guy you trained with, and I'm trying to remember who. Yes, it was Scott. And you guys were just, it was kind of a little bit. There was one joke, then there was another joke, then there was another joke. And I just said, okay, I'm going to sit back and enjoy this. This is really fun. But you guys were a blast. But I'm looking forward to seeing your next evolution. And Chris, I've enjoyed, watching you during your career. This was really cool. I want to go on the record in telling you that the coverage you did of the British Olympic trials pulled bigger than our NCAA cross country and NCAA track this year, which is a week before. And I think it's because, one, it was such an intimate story, such a small, and there was so much on the line for you guys. And Hutchings and Morrow were wonderful. I hate to say anything nice about Hutchings, but he is a good announcer. I just don't want him to get a big head. But it was just lovely to watch. And I wish you the very best. I will hope to see you in Tokyo, and we're going to call it a session. So this is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, and we are finishing up Socialing the Distance. We featured 2-time British Olympian Chris Thompson, who just won the British Olympic trials in a PB at the young age of 39, with a great smile and a show of a lot of pleasure after a 26-year career. So, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And when after this pandemic, I got my one shot about 10 days ago, when they started allowing me to travel out of this country, I'll grab you for a pint or two.
Oh, definitely. Okay? No, I look forward to it.
Chris, thanks a lot.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
Well, hell, you sport fans, it's Larry Eder, RunBlogRun. This is your favorite program, Socialing the Distance. And this week we had Chris Thompson, the newly crowned British Olympic Trials, Mueller British Olympic Trials Marathon champion and a 2-time Olympian. Chris is one of my favorites, I got to tell you. He has competed for 26 years. First time he wore a British vest was in 1998 in the steeplechase at the European, I think it was the European Juniors. And he is competing now at the age of 39. He becomes 40 on April 17th. The week before he won the Olympic trials, he became a proud father. He and his wife, Gemma, have a son, Theo, and he had a crazy week. And in the Olympic marathon, which was a 12 laps of 3.33K and 1 lap of 1.66K, held in the Kew Gardens, the Kew Botanical Gardens, he waited till after 30K to take the lead again, and with 4 miles to go, he busted away, winning in 2:10:52, a new PB. Um, he was a steeplechaser, then a 1,500 guy, then a 5,000, then a 10,000. European silver medalist at 10,000. Under 23 European champion at 5,000, where he beat Mo. Last time he beat Mo Farah. Mo beat him in the 10,000 at the European. In fact, Mo looked back with about a lap and a half when Chris was having one of those moments of the soul with Daniel Mucci on the side of him and a Spaniard in front, and he caught the Spaniard with about 500 to go and moved away into second place. I've watched Chris run a 27:27. I've watched him run a 61-minute half marathon. I've watched him in several of his good marathons and several of his challenging marathons. But what this Olympic Trials Marathon was all about was a real moment of the soul, a mile of trials and a trial of miles, as John Parker would say in Once a Runner, one of the books I quote. But after 26 years of reinforcing the neuromuscular loop, which is what training's all about, Chris was able to put it all together. Over that time, he's had the help of, let's see, who is it? He had 4 coaches, Mick Wood, John Nuttall, Mark Rowland, and Alan Story. And I asked him in the interview for what he learned from each one of them and to describe those coaches, because I believe a coach-athlete relationship is, well, let's have it. It's sacred. It's an important thing. It's not about the littlest thing a coach teaches you is how to compete or how to run, jump, or throw. What coaches teach you is how to live your life, because running is the silliest part of our existence, but it's something that we put a lot of interest in, and it changes our lives. Doesn't matter if you run 12 minutes for a mile or you're chasing the world record. The lesson with Chris Thompson is to never give up, keep a good sense of humor, and always tell your mates jokes. Chris is it's an interesting athlete. I've been fascinated with his career. I love it when a person's career ends on a really high note. I think we'll see him around for a few more years. We talked about Commonwealth Games next year, possibly World Championships in Eugene, where he lived with his wife Gemma for a while when they were both coached by Mark Rowland. But Chris is a great role model, and I think that it's also interesting to note how so many North Americans got into his competition. We did live tweeting of via social media on the British Marathon and encouraged people to watch the broadcast, just like we did with the NCAA cross country and track. And the marathon outpulled the NC cross country and the NC track, not because those aren't great events, but it's because I think our readers and our viewers wanted to see a marathon that was challenging and that was unique. And Ben O'Connor, Mo Adine, and Chris Thompson and Dewey Griffiths had a real battle up there. The commentating by Tim Hutchings and by Mara Yamochi was fantastic. The drone coverage, the video coverage, the course was wonderful. Tom, Jade, and David Bedford and their team should be congratulated because they put on a no-win event. And what I mean by that is they weren't making gazillions. British Athletics, thank God, and Mueller covered the cost and supported them, and the folks at Nike as well. But it was something that was put on because a British Marathon Championship Olympic trial selection race hadn't been done in 40 years. It always was part of the London Marathon. So this is a unique event. And each year, for the last 5 or 6 years, Jade and Tom have put on the Richmond Distance Festival, and they will continue to do it. And for many years before that, David Bedford was involved at a very high level with the London Marathon and would always regale me with a couple pints of Guinness and welcome to the world's greatest marathon. Well, I think they took all that spirit and put it into an event that was won by Chris Thompson and Steph Davis. We'll have Steph, we'll be chatting with her soon. But this was Chris Thompson's time. So, Chris Thompson, thank you. Thank you for your time. We went terribly over. Normally 40 minutes. I think we went about 65 or 70. But there was a lot for us to talk about. So this is Larry Eder saying good night. Your favorite program, Socialing the Distance. And we featured a two-time British Olympian, Chris Thompson, who just won the 2021 Mueller British Olympic Marathon Trials. If you like Run Blog Run, like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you love us, subscribe on YouTube. Stay safe.